All right, shalom. Welcome to another Expert Inside interview. My name is John Goldin from Sales Pop, online sales magazine, and Pipeliner CRM, joining you as usual from a sunny San Diego. And today I'm delighted to be joined from, as they like to say here, across the pond over in Europe, in the Netherlands, by Joris Merks Benjaminsen. How are you doing, Joris?
Hi there, very good. It's not sunny here. It's like pitch dark.
Yeah. It's that time. It's in the evening. And Joris is award-winning author. His latest book is titled Managing Without Power. Joris had a leading role in Google's DEI initiatives, was one of the highest scoring managers in the company's history. And today he trains leaders, managers to help find the right balance between humaneness and performance pressure. And you can learn more at managingwithoutpower.com. And let's talk about building high performance teams and organizations. Building a high performing team is still one of the toughest things that anybody can undertake, because you have to have the right leader in place, you have to have the right mix of talent, you have to have today we have 4 or 5 generations in the workplace, so you have to understand, it's the days are gone of like being able to communicate in one way only, because people consume information in different ways. So yours, just at a high level, is this one of the? Do you think we're at a point now where like running and creating a high performing team probably is as challenging, if not more challenging, than it's ever been?
I think it has always been challenging. Like it is hard in general,
Mm-hmm.
but it gets harder the larger your company becomes. That's one of the critical things in my observation. So very often you see in this startup phase, when the founder of a startup has heart in the right place, is very clear why they have founded that startup, what they're doing, what they're not doing. So there's a clear sense of mission, direction, then automatically that team shapes itself around that person. And then, you get management team, another layer of managers, and it starts drifting. And that's when it becomes really hard to build high performing teams. And I think with now new generations coming in, no longer accepting the traditional top down leadership style, it's even harder than it ever was.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it is the changing nature of organizations, where, as you said, top down or hierarchical organizations, because in traditionally companies have scaled with people, and that means that as you get more people, you put in more, as you said, layers of management, middle management, and really, to be an effective organization today, personally, I believe you have to be much more matrixed and less hierarchical in your structure. But that requires two things. It requires like the bravery of the organization leadership to do that, and at the same time, the personal accountability of people.
Yeah, I don't necessarily believe that the problem is in the structure of the hierarchy, but it's mostly like once people are put in a structure and you're higher in that structure, then you get a certain amount of power. It's also why I chose that title,
Mhm.
Managing Without Power. Like day one, you become a formal manager or leader. There's certain things that people no longer say to you, or there's things that they're saying to you because they think it's what you want to hear. And then the other way around, there's a certain pressure that you can put on people without realizing it. And the higher you are in hierarchy, like very small things you do, just asking a critical question could just create enormous pressure on people without you realizing it. And
Mhm.
so I think the hierarchy, the structure itself is not the problem, but the problem is leaders not realizing what that power position does to the organization beneath them. And
Mhm.
and the art is to neutralize that power position, because I do believe that some hierarchical structure also is beneficial for companies in order to steer fast, be nimble, steer in orchestration.
Yeah. No, no, I would agree with you on that. But what I'm just saying is like the traditional ones of, that's the demarcations. And I guess that's the other thing is roles have evolved and things that there's demarcation of roles isn't as clear as maybe it once was. But tell me, so how do you strike the balance between being, being able to be a leader and get things done and move things forward and at the same time be understanding and sensitive to your people without going one way, going too far one way or the other? Because I've seen it where people have tried to be too much on one side and they be dictatorial, or too much on the other side where they can't get anything done because they're too busy trying to be a friend to everyone.
Yeah, and also flip-flopping is very common. So
Yeah,
so
yeah.
sometimes you have traditional hierarchical managers that realize, okay, I need to do another style, need to give people more autonomy so there's more space for innovation. And then that space is given for a certain amount of time until they become impatient. And
Hmm.
then suddenly they jump in and start micromanaging top down again. So
Hmm.
so I think that flip-flopping is probably even worse. Um, what I believe is that that's also that idea behind managing without power. It's a phrase that is focused on those that are in a position of formal power, because that power corrupts the attention that you put downwards in teams. So there are certain things, certain behaviors you get away with that you never would demonstrate towards people above you. So when someone is in a senior leadership, it is pretty much expected that they come somewhat late to meetings. Um, they will take a bit more speech time. Instead of asking questions, they're more likely to just state, like this is good, this is not good, this is what I expect from you, etc. Um, they might leave a bit early. They might struggle with their attention towards. And then, if you think about all these behaviors, and would they do that if they were in a meeting with someone above them? They would never do that.
Hmm.
But they get away with it because people don't tell them because of their power position. So the first thing to achieve is actually uh, put in your mind a thought experiment with also an accountability mechanism that I will explain later. Like, how would I do these things if I would not have the power that is inevitably connected to my role? And
Right.
as soon as you do that thought experiment, you start behaving more shoulder to shoulder with your
Hmm.
team whenever you can. And then every now and then you need to make a top-down decision, or you need to give someone a performance rating, manage a person out. That's when you need to exert the power in a useful way. But
Hmm.
stop wasting the power on the moments when you need to be shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
So I think that switching back and forth between top down, shoulder to shoulder is a new management style that is needed in this new era.
Yeah. I have to say, I always said to people that when that the hardest thing or the best skill to learn, it's not managing people below you, it's actually managing upwards. Is when you can learn to manage the person above you, then you really cracked it.
Yeah. Well, if leadership does this idea of managing without power,
Hmm.
it also requires everybody below them to become more assertive,
Hmm.
and have a like challenge strategy upwards,
Yeah.
or whenever they have certain behaviors that are not good for effectiveness and culture of the org, also challenge it, give them direct feedback. And typically people find that really hard to do, because, and sometimes justifiably so, because it could backfire. And
Hmm.
so one of the mechanisms I always introduce is formal upward feedback from teams towards their managers and leaders. And I use the 10 behaviors of great managers from Google for that, like a survey.
Hmm.
And that's an opportunity for the leader to get that voice, that upward voice, upcoming again. And when you genuinely listen to it, have a dialogue about it, you change your behavior and it doesn't backfire, at some point after you do that several cycles, people start telling you to your face again when they want to challenge strategy, etc. And that's when you have maturity at both levels.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what you're saying, that the key there is maturity at both levels, isn't it? Because I mean, sometimes when you give people the 360, you allow them feedback, they just think, "Oh, this is a great opportunity to like point out everything that's possibly wrong with my manager," as opposed to it's like that concept. And this is the one that I've always struggled with is we're always trying to fix people, right? And we tend to focus as humans, we tend to focus on weaknesses or perceived weaknesses or areas as a and And oftentimes those are going to be areas of things that you're not good at. You're never going to be good at. You don't even want to be good at it, right? Instead of flipping it on its head and saying, why don't I focus on the things that Joris is really, really good at and give him an opportunity to get even better at those, to do more of that, rather than focusing on trying to fix things that he's not very good at, that probably he's never going to be any good at.
Absolutely true. Yeah. The nice thing is that I've been scored by my team at Google 12 times across
Mhm.
6 years. And those evaluations from my team counted for my performance evaluations. And
Right.
so they would affect my bonus, my promotion
Mhm.
opportunity, etc. And the interesting thing is that I discovered, particularly in the first few cycles, some things that were normal to me that I never thought would be special, how much value they created for people. So an example was being highly responsive. So I come from a martial arts background, so I have a very disciplined lifestyle.
Mhm.
So whenever someone sends an email to me, or if I promise an action, I typically do it within an hour. But
Right.
that responsiveness was valued so highly by people because they felt like they get instant clarity. They felt seen and valued because I just made the time almost on the spot.
Mhm.
And so that was actually like I thought it was normal, and I highly valued it. And also just showing up on time for meetings, showing up with full attention, genuinely listening. But then on the other side, I thought I was being servicing my team by responding to every single email in 5 minutes.
Mhm.
But there were also some people who got really stressed by that.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
when
yeah.
you are senior and you send them an email to a person, they feel obliged to read it and respond. So they would send an email back to me. Within 5 minutes, they get another response from me. And that keeps going. So I also learned based on that feedback to flex my leadership style. Like not everybody likes email as a channel. Some people are happy with speed. Some people get nervous. So kind of your senses become much sharper, and you learn to flex.
Yeah, that's a great example, and like I said, it's a great example of that you can't have a one size fits all, right? As you said, and something that maybe we perceive as a strength, or as in your case, like a lot of people love the fact that you're that responsive, but there are some people who don't because that's stress. And um, you wouldn't even know that, would you? Because you would have just assumed that that was a great thing for everyone,
Yeah,
unless you've
exactly.
gotten that
And
feedback.
probably if that feedback mechanism hadn't existed, I don't think they would have told me to my face.
Right.
No, it was only later, after I had several of those cycles and I discovered things in it, that I discussed it with them, and I started adjusting, and they noticed, oh, he actually values that type of input, and so people start giving you more of it. But if you
Yeah,
think of that position from power, and where people don't tell you, what ends up happening is people very often start morphing how they work towards the preferences of the senior person,
sure.
which isn't good for the organization at all.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it would have been kind of a funny thing if somebody just walked up to you out of the blue and said, "Joris, don't reply to me immediately."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. But eventually they did.
I know,
Yeah,
but I'm just saying that
yeah,
without you, before you knew that, that would have been a very strange thing for somebody to say to you, right? Or you
yeah,
would have
exactly.
gone, "Huh." Yeah,
Yeah,
and you talked about it because I think in all of this, the more that we become aware and the more that things become balanced, the greater personal accountability becomes critical.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you think about that balance between performance and human,
Mhm.
um, you can only, let's say the idea behind performance is like you agree something, and the person either delivers or doesn't. If they
Mhm.
do, great, that might
Yeah.
even mean extra reward. If they don't, it has to have consequences. And but if someone doesn't deliver and it has negative consequences, but you have never been clear upfront what you expected in the first place,
Mhm.
you haven't given them the right amount of autonomy, not the right amount of attention, not the right amount of support, etc., then when you hold them accountable, it creates unsafety.
Mhm.
But when you invest lots of time in people upfront, you are very clear about what you expect. You have regular check-ins together. When they need support, they get it fast. When they do very well and need autonomy, they get it, and they get feedback several times. And then at some point, at the end of the year in a performance cycle, you say, okay, listen, we talked about this several times. I gave you support whenever you need it, but it's still not good enough. Now you get consequences.
Mhm.
Then it's fair and it's predictable. And if it's fair and predictable, you can hold people accountable without creating unsafety. So the more you invest up front, the higher you can raise the bar. And that's where this balance between human and performance is so critical.
Yeah, no, I like that idea, but the fair and predictable, because we don't operate well when things are vague. And as you said, there's that sense of unfairness if you say, well, I didn't, John, you didn't deliver what I asked you to deliver, and you said, well, you weren't very clear that that's what you wanted. Then we're in a standoff there, right? And we're not going to have a very good relationship. I think the other thing too, Joris, is again, it's a human nature trait. Is we're great at spotting mistakes, and we're great at spotting when people don't do things well. We're awful at catching people doing things right, right? Just going at that moment of going, wow, that was really cool, that was really great what you just did there. We kind of sometimes forget to do that, but if we see you doing something you shouldn't be doing, we're right on it.
Yeah, there's a very strong link between that observation and the topic of feedback. So the topic of feedback is one of the most common ones where I get asked, like, we want a training on giving better feedback.
Mhm.
And they typically would ask to that around the period of a performance cycle, because that's when people get feedback
Yeah.
most. And the idea is like, we need to give each other more feedback because we need to be sharper. And that means lots of negative feedback typically.
Yeah, yeah.
And the reality is, if feedback comes during the performance cycle, it's way too late.
Yeah.
No, it needs to be way earlier. And the
Mhm.
other thing is, um, landing difficult feedback becomes easier when you build trust with the person. Because when you build trust and they know you mean well for them, you want to help them grow, they're going to internalize even the most difficult pieces of feedback and they grow from it. But
Mhm.
that requires you to also start with positive feedback as early as you can. So as soon as a person onboards in your team, spend enough time with them to see the unique traits they bring to the team, the unique ways they try to provide value, the big and small ways. Notice it, articulate it, and not like, well done, thank you, but I saw you doing X, Y, and Z, and this
Mhm.
is how it creates value. Fantastic, thank you. And preferably with even potentially love in what you're saying, so they genuinely feel seen and valued. The more you do that upfront, the easier it becomes to land the most difficult feedback possible later down the line, if you have sufficient trust.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's an and I think onboarding. I think that's early on in somebody's career in a company. I think that's where a lot of companies fall down because they don't. We're talking again about predictability and clarity. Is you're hired for a job, then you come into the company. There's maybe a little bit of training here, but a lot of times you're kind of left and you're kind of sink or swim kind of thing, and you start off kind of in a bit of a deficit, and you're worried and stressed, like, I don't know what I should be doing, and that. And I think that's where a lot of companies fall down, is that they're not good at onboarding people and making sure that they, as you said, that they're very clear in what's expected of them.
Yeah, there's two typical patterns there. So like in my trainings, I use a matrix, which is the one which about the balance between performance pressure and human focus. And if you have high humaneness but low structure accountability, that's survival of the nicest.
Hmm.
Whereas if you have low humaneness but high structure and accountability, survival of the toughest.
Hmm.
And so those are the two archetypes of clients I typically get. So if you have a survival of the nicest type of culture, people do typically get enough time to ramp up, et cetera, et cetera. But then the clarity of goals is not there. So they go all kinds of directions. And then at some point, people are somewhat unhappy with what they delivered. But then it doesn't have direct consequences. So it
Hmm.
keeps going on and on and on until it becomes a real problem. And then finally someone intervenes, but way too late, and then they call in sick, etc.
Yeah.
And but if you have this survival of the toughest kind of mentality, then very often you just enter, you get thrown in the deep, you get very clear goals, but not enough time with your manager. You just expect it to survive, and when you don't, they will just give you a low performance rating, hoping that it's a wake-up call. But very often it's a slap in the face and makes people scared and they spiral down. And then you're fired. And people around that look at it, oh, I could be next. So it spreads a bit of fear. So both patterns aren't good. And you need to do that in this balance. And then you can see it much earlier. So like give them guidance. The more clear you are, the more guidance you give people, the faster you will see it when they go off track, the faster you will spot it that they're not going to make it. And you can intervene at exactly the right moment, not too early, not too late. And when you have to fire them, it doesn't spread fear amongst your team members.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, listen, Joris, this has been fascinating insights. Thank you for sharing them with us. All of Joris's information will be below this video. But before we go, do tell people a little bit more about the work you do.
And so I work with these archetypes, the survival of the nicest as well as survival of the toughest kind of organizations, where one, either humaneness or accountability needs to be dialed up. I work with their formal managers and leaders in all layers of the organization to reset the balance by creating consistent leadership behavior at all levels. And I do so by training, coaching, and a bit of consulting here and there.
Excellent. Well, listen, again, thank you, Joris, for sharing your insights. Thank you for watching and listening. I'll see you all again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.